quick look at the Korg MS-03. It's a pretty rare signal processor made by Korg, and basically it's designed to take a monophonic input signal and output the kind of control voltage signals that you would use to drive an analog synthesizer. Okay, so I'm using this Klein Flaxwood guitar. It's a Flaxwood guitar made from a kit by a guy in Texas, but it's pretty much a Flaxwood guitar. And I'm using the neck pickup. And we're going straight into the signal in. I've got the level turned up pretty high, and I'm consistently peaking. I find that if I don't hit that peak signal level, it's not really triggering the circuit. Now this is the low range. The low range has been optimized as noted in the owner's manual for the range of pitches you find on a guitar. If I go to the high range and play the same thing, it's dropped it down 1 octave. So if you're playing an instrument in a higher register, I guess to accommodate for the limited voltage outputs of this, they drop it down 1 octave. I'm not really sure what they're thinking there on that, but that's the range switch. We have 3 different modes of operation. According to the manual, one being the most sensitive and having the quickest tracking. And then as you go up to mode 3, it's less sensitive, but the tracking is more stable. I didn't really see a big difference. Let's listen. That's 1. 3. So that's 3. You can kind of see that 3 is a little bit more sluggish. Okay. Again, with any of these guitar synthesizers, the cleaner you play, the better it's going to track. So then we have, as I talked about earlier, I've got my output set up over here where I'm driving the synth. So let's have a look at Portamento. So here is with the Portamento off. And we'll play a note an octave above that. There you go. Portamento. Now, the MS-03 has a number of sort of live performance foot switch controls. So I'm going to plug into the Portamento circuit, and basically we can turn the Portamento on and off. I've just got a basic momentary switch here. Let me play a high note. And I'm going to hold down the switch. We can hear the Portamento sliding down. If I lift up on the switch and play the high note again, the Portamento is off. So whenever the switch is engaged, whenever we're grounding it, that turns the Portamento effect on. Let's have a look at these other controls. Now, the first one is a control voltage hold, which is kind of interesting. So when control voltage hold, when you have your foot switch engaged, it's going to sort of remember whatever pitch you're playing at that point. Okay, we'll turn the Portamento off. Let's try that again. And no matter what note I play, it's playing the same pitch, which is kind of weird. I'm not really sure what musical effect they're going for there, but that's how that works. Now, more useful is control voltage and trigger hold. And in this case, when I've got the foot switch held down, it's always going to play, it's going to indefinitely sustain that note. So let's see. So I've got my finger on the strings. It's just going to continue to hold this note. Both the envelope and the control voltage are being sustained or held at the levels they were when I pushed down on the foot switch. Now, in order for this to work, you need to have some sort of sustain level set up in your envelope. If I get rid of the sustain level, this won't make any difference. If it's just a note with just a short decay, then holding down this indefinite sustain doesn't do you any good. And then we have the cancel, which is kind of neat. It's just sort of like turns the synth tracking on and off. And if I hold it down, it stops working. If I let it back up. So those are the foot switch inputs on the unit. Now there's one other feature here that's nice to mention is we have an envelope control out. So we're tracking the envelope of the guitar or the amplitudes. You know how guitars work. Initially, when you play a note, the amplitude's pretty loud, then it decays pretty quickly. So we can hear that. I've got the envelope output, and it's patched into what would normally be the modulation generator point on this patch base. So everywhere that we see modulation generator, as I turn up these control voltage inputs, I'm actually adding to the circuit the output from the Korg MS-03, the envelope output. So let's hear what happens when I add that to the frequency generation. So what you're hearing is, as the amplitude of the signal starts high and then goes low, that voltage is decreasing. And when we apply that to the pitch, that means the pitch, as the note decays, the pitch of the guitar goes down, which is a little weird. If I play softly and then play hard, kind of mixed results there. I use this to demonstrate it because it's a little bit clearer what we're doing with the modulation, but probably a more useful way to take advantage of this envelope signal is to apply it to the filter cutoff. So as we play harder, it's going to get brighter. Let me turn that up a little bit more. And then as the note decays, the filter is going to get darker. So it's kind of like an envelope follower. Well, it is an envelope follower. It's not kind of like an envelope follower. It is. I wanted to take a minute to focus on the fact that one of the things that makes this unit so incredibly versatile is that there are two sets of control voltage outputs. For the Behringer K2, because this is a clone of a Korg MS-20, we're using the hertz to volts output. So there's a one-to-one correspondence between the pitch that you play and the voltage that you get. So if you play a note an octave above a note and then play another note an octave above that, each time the frequency is doubling, and each time the control voltage is doubling. The other standard is the standard used by ARP or Moog or the Eurorack, which is the volts per octave standard. And that's this jack that we see below the hertz per volts output. There's the volts per octave. And in that case, every octave is 1 volt across the board. And you'll notice that for the volts per octave output, we have two more controls. There's a frequency control and a width control. And then we have two kinds of trigger outputs. So one trigger standard says we're going to take a signal and short that trigger to ground. And I believe that's what we've got here for this first one, because a little diagram shows something being grounded. The other kind of trigger output is where you start sort of at 0 volts, and then the trigger signal is like typically plus 5 volts above that. So when I hook this unit up to the Korg ARP Odyssey reissue, and I'll include a video clip using a different guitar and using different patching for the Odyssey, but we have to use these alternate outputs. So this output, hertz per volt, and then this first trigger output, this works with like the Korg MS-10, MS-20, or Yamaha mono synths from that period. And then we also notice over here we have a frequency and a width control that's unique to the 1 volt per octave standard. And the way I use these controls, it wasn't quite 100% clear to me from the manual what these were to do, but I use the frequency control to tune the output of the MS-03 to the synthesizer, and you can see straight up worked just fine for me. And then width is sort of like, what I noticed was if I played a low E, once I tuned in the low E, that note was solid. If I played, say, a high E, the note was a little bit sharp, and this width control seems to affect the higher notes. So the high E was a little bit sharp. I just made this just a little bit flat, and then the intonation was much more correct. As I went up the neck of the guitar, the notes were consistently in tune. So that's one of the neat things about the MS-03 that really makes it stand out, is the fact that you have both output standards, both the 1 volt per octave, which is sort of like identified with Moog and Eurorack. And then we also have the hertz per volt output, which is a little bit rare, and you don't see that often. I did look to see if there is an equivalent like Eurorack module that will do something similar to this. And the ones I did find were actually kind of on the pricey side, maybe like around $300 or $400, which is kind of almost in the same range as what I was able to pick this unit up for used. So it's kind of hard to find a pitch to volt converter that gives you both of these standards, and it's definitely one of the things that makes the MS-03 really stand apart.